Welcome to the Living Legendary podcast with Nigel, also known as Baby Nigel, and Lady Sham, known as Lady Sham. We have a sex therapist today, and when I hear sex and therapist, I think, who knows what? You be the judge. All I think is we're going to think and dig about sex, or just human nature for that matter. Sham, what's up?
Yes, I'm here. I'm very excited. I can't wait. Is Violet here?
She's here, yes.
I am.
Hi, Violet. Violet, why don't you tell us about yourself and what is exactly a sex therapist?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me on the show. I listen to your episodes and I love it. And I'm a sex coach, not exactly technically a sex therapist, but it's along the same lines. And I'm all about helping people feel connected to their pleasure, their bodies, each other, like their hearts, their parts, everything in between.
So to clarify, sex coach?
Yeah, a sex coach. I mean, it's fine. It's just, I'm not officially, certified as a therapist. It's like a different genre. But anyway.
For our listeners, what is the main difference?
Well, sex therapists normally are like certified by, a state board or something like that. And a lot of times they're working with people on the problems in their sex life, like what's not working. And coaches oftentimes are working on like, what do you want to experience more of? Like more pleasure, more intimacy, more connection, more sensation, more kink. Like it's just kind of a broader range of things that you can explore.
Wow, that's interesting. What are some of the things that people often ask about coaching? Like what are the departments they ask? What are the questions they ask? And how do you help them?
Well, a lot of people ask about how to just have more pleasure and not be in their heads, not be worried about how they look or societal expectations and all that stuff that kind of gets in the way. And so people might ask about just how to feel more alive and more connected to their partner. If they're single, they might ask like, how do I meet someone that we have really good physical connection, but emotional connection? So I feel like most of us are just, we want love. We want to be loved just as we are. We want to give love because that feels really good too. And if there are things that are getting in our way, we can talk about that. But usually it's more about us just really claiming who we are and what we want and being in touch with our desires and expanding into a bigger version of love with a partner and with ourselves, And I was thinking before we started the show tonight, like the inspiration for what I do actually came from when Prince died. And I went to the Rain Room, which is this exhibit in Los Angeles, this kind of cool art exhibit. And I felt like I was getting a download from Prince about like people need to be in their pleasure, like people being connected to their bodies and having fun, like what could be more important than that? And so that kind of started this journey of the pleasure path and helping people find more pleasure with themselves and in relationship and in dating, because we can really get lost in like the apps and swiping and just kind of like the details of dating instead of focusing on the love and the intimacy.
Violet, you mentioned Prince and his death. I'm wondering, Do you know how he died? Because to this day, I don't know what happened. And I'm pretty sure from what I've read in the news, nobody knows. Do you know?
I do not know. I am from Minnesota. I went to high school in Minnesota. I have always had a love affair with Prince. And I was heartbroken when he died. And I also don't know. It's a mystery. Like, I personally want to believe that like his angels were like, you have given so much to this sweet earth. Like, let us embrace you and just take you to an easier place. But who knows? I don't know. I hope that he died having sex or something, glorious and where he felt really loved and seen.
So I had a question, and it's going back to before we got into Prince, which I love as well. You mentioned people getting lost on the apps. What is there? Something people meet, this, that, and the other, farmer and whatever. There's all sorts of apps out there. There's an app for everybody, right? So there's probably an app for musicians as well. But what my whole point basically is, how long have you been doing this? Because there wasn't apps and things like that, 10 years ago, 20 years ago? People were still looking for love, but how did you do it back then? It was all, person to person, handwriting letters. I mean, it goes back further and further. So finding love, most people in this generation, this, day and age are thinking about apps, but there was a way to like find love or just, you meet at this place at this time and I'm there. Like there's all these secret things about, sex and I'll leave it there. I'm just opening up a can of worms, hopefully.
Yeah. I mean, Farmers Only, all of those crazy apps. I don't know about an app for musicians, but if someone hasn't made one, then they totally should. That's a great idea. Yeah, I mean, back in the day, yeah, handwritten notes, like bathroom stalls. I mean, people just had to get creative. And now with the apps, everything gets really complicated. And I think in some ways, it's kind of sad because we don't go out as much and do cool things like you guys' drive bingo or other things that are fun where you're actually meeting people in real life. And I try to encourage the people that I work with to build a life that they love and go out doing fun things and trust that they will connect with the right people and allow themselves to be seen and to have a good time. And God, I mean, I remember being like 6 years old and this boy from my elementary school called me and said, I just called to say I love you, because the Stevie Wonder hit was like a big, big deal going on back then. And it's quaint. Like I kind of miss those days, but I also know there was a lot of dysfunctional relationships. People didn't feel like they had options. And so they maybe felt trapped in a relationship, or, you know, if they had unique sexual interests, there probably wasn't as many opportunities to get those needs met. You know, now there's apps specifically about different types of kink or different dom sub roles, or just, you know, a variety of ways to really connect in these different parts of you.
So for our listeners, when you say the word kink, I think about the band, the Kinks, kind of. No, I get what that is, but can you let people know what kinks are? Kinks are basically taboo, if you will. Is that the right word, or is that too far off?
No, that's totally right. Yeah. I mean, I think of kink as in the definition is kind of like when a garden hose gets kinked, like there's pressure building up and the flow of erotic energy or whatever can't always flow through. So a kink is anything that I believe that like unwinds that tension and or can kind of like build the tension. And so usually kinks are taboo because there's pleasure in doing things we're not supposed to. Like there's pleasure in being naughty. And I don't even really love that word naughty, but it's this idea that like, you know, if something is forbidden, then sometimes we want that even more. And so kinks can be everything from like having a kink around food and being fed certain foods and like that being a turn on, or a kink can be around like shame, you know, like so many of us were shamed growing up for who we are and who we were. And instead of taking that personally and being like, yeah, you know, I'm a bad person, it's like, oh yeah, shame me and I get turned on by that. You can't shame me too much. Like it just builds my pleasure. Like there's a way that we can own our shame and turn it into a cathartic and enjoyable experience in some of these different types of kink. So I don't work, you know, just with kink, but I think it's like a fascinating psychological study in our emotions, our society, what we deem acceptable, what we don't, and how to like play with those edges in a way that feels really empowering.
And what led you to that kind of work?
Well, I had sexual abuse. I experienced sexual abuse when I was young. And then I had some other experiences related to that as I got older. And like a good Midwestern girl, I was like, the solution is to just get married really early to someone I'm not totally in love with and just pretend that everything is okay. So I was married for 5 years in my 20s. It was a total disaster. I think we had sex like less than 10 times in 5 years or 6 years. And at one point I just had this wake up call. I was like, what am I doing? Like, I feel like I'm 80 years old and I'm not connected to my body, my pleasure. Like I know I have work to do on that part of myself. And so I ended that marriage. I mean, I have respect for my ex, but it just wasn't working for me. And it led me on this path of discovery to not only heal my trauma, but to figure out like all the different ways that someone can orgasm. You know, you can orgasm, you can have a toegasm, you can have a like back of your wrist or behind the knee orgasm. Like you can have all these types of energetic orgasms that aren't necessarily about ejaculating or climaxing in like a porn star way, but they're about really like finding all the ways that our body can get turned on. It was kind of like a painful path.
Do they call that tantric? Is that a term of something? Am I smart on that?
Yeah. So tantric sex, you're so on it, Nigel. You like know all of this world.
Thank you.
Tantric sex is where people are just sharing energy. It's about energetic orgasm, sharing energy, kind of pairing turn on with the breath to expand your orgasm and have more full body orgasm. And it's really about like, I call it like merging or union, you know, so it could be union with different parts of yourself. It could be union with another human being. It could be union with God, you know, like getting turned on by the divine, whatever, you know, that means to you. Like, I don't mean a traditional kind of like religious God, but turned on by like this greater life force that's pulsing through all of us. And, you know, I've been in my car, like listening to great music with the heat seater on and seeing the waves crashing by Laguna Beach and being like, I'm having an orgasm right now. Like there's just so much power and energy here with all of these different elements. So tantric sex can absolutely be part of it. And it doesn't have to just be with a partner.
Wow. Where do you live? Are you in Los Angeles or where do you live?
I am in LA, yes, but I do love the desert. I think it's awesome that you guys are out there.
Where did you grow up?
I first grew up in Nebraska and outside of Lincoln, and that was interesting. Like I've heard you talk on the show about growing up in Peoria and really resonate a lot with what you've shared in your journey. And then we moved to Minnesota when I was like in middle school, and I think I went to 4 different middle schools in 1 or 2 years, and was like, wow, this is intense. So needless to say, like then I left the Midwest, but there's just, there's so much cultural conditioning around sex, and especially growing up in the Midwest. And like, I'm somewhat embarrassed, but I feel like I just have to say it. Like I didn't even touch myself sexually until I was 27. I just had no concept that was possible. I was raised in a very Christian, conservative household that like, sex is just for marriage. And while I didn't necessarily like abide by that law, I hadn't like literally taken pleasure into my own hands until I was almost 30, which I look back on and I'm just like, whoa, that's so such a tragedy. So I think, that shapes a lot too of my passion of wanting to do this and help people to break through some of their limitations that they've absorbed from their parents or from their culture or from their religion.
So we're talking about, you were religious or whatever, so that maybe that had to do with not expressing physical situations that we all know that we do because we're all humans. What culture, obviously it's not like the culture that we live in the United States, like what culture or cultures like the Egyptians, when was it like non-radical to show off your sexuality?
Oh, yeah. I think that's a fantastic question. I mean, I am not an expert in this area, but I've heard that back in Roman times when the people went out to war, like men would be sent with the soldiers that were there for sex. And now I do not know if that was consensual, but it was considered to be a basic need. Like sex was a basic need. It didn't matter who you were having sex with. Like it was just a natural part of being a human. And then, like you said, in Egyptian times, I've heard of Isis sex priestess temples, and it wasn't about what we might think of or label as like prostitution. It was about sacred sexuality. It was about giving and receiving pleasure as an act of worship to the divine. It was about healing and, giving each other different experiences as an act of healing and remembering our wholeness. So I do think we used to have times in humanity where sex was celebrated and sacred and not so much shame and taboo, but I definitely have not lived in those times. I mean, I think it's getting better. But yeah, I'm excited to see maybe 100 years from now, I probably won't live that long, but 100 years from now, what might be possible.
Well, it's kind of funny because maybe like the 1950s, people started getting more rigid, and maybe even a decade or two before that, there's a lot of struggle in humanity. But at a certain point, we're all liberated. We all feel free for a while. And that's when the 60s came in. So that's kind of when people were having free love, air quotes, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think it does go in cycles and it does go in waves. And hopefully those cycles are just leading to more liberation and expansion and pleasure. And shows like this, I think, really help open people's minds and hearts to all the different ways that people can live their best life and have the most fun along the way and feel good about what they're doing.
I was going to ask about it. What do you think of the current state of America right now? Do you think we're moving in the right direction with that, or do you think we're going backwards?
Oh, man. I mean, I think it depends on like what microcosm. I know there's the United States and we have like our global impact for better or worse that we have. But I also think it's these micro communities that really make a difference. Like what I know of you guys' community is freaking awesome. Like I feel like my community here in LA is amazing. And so as a whole, I would like to believe that we're moving in the right direction, but there's so much division and so much, I don't know, like kind of attacking and not seeing each other in the ways that would really celebrate all that we are. So it's hard for me to say on a macro level, but I think if you focus on the communal and individual people, there's a lot of amazing people out there doing great stuff. Like I say to my friends all the time, thank you for the helpers. Like there's just so many helpers. Like each of you are helpers, like helping people have fun, helping people celebrate themselves, helping people like have a good time and see their beauty. Like, yeah, I see a lot of helpers out there and that gives me hope. But when I look at the broad level, then I get a little discouraged. I'm curious what you guys think.
Well, what I'm curious as to what I've noticed just of like what the internet shows you is monogamy is like something to not be proud of anymore. it seems to be like the more the merrier. I mean, it goes on both ends, but there's podcasts and people that talk about, they say it's like a new thing. How many bodies do you have? That's like some new terminology that's out there. And then other people are just like, I'm waiting till marriage and things like that. But it's kind of like wild right now. At least what I'm getting on my algorithm of, both sides of love and hate in the world.
Yeah, I mean, you make a great point. There's like a spectrum. And I feel like the more that we explore as humans, the spectrum just gets wider. And that means there's more people that are playing in all of these different ways with their sexuality. And I'm a monogamous person, but I'm very sexually expressive and open. And that's just what works for me and my nervous system. For other people, like they need more novelty or variety or they want to push their edges in those ways. And, I think, Nigel, you have a young child, like I have a 3-year-old too. And it just doesn't work for like our family right now to explore that. And maybe it won't ever. And that's okay with me. So yeah, I'm wanting that people explore their sexuality in a way that feels really integrated and embodied and all of that. But who am I to say?
I honestly think marriage is outdated, and I think that they should do away with it. I think that I like all that new stuff with the polyester or the polyunanimous. I like that. That's for me.
Yes, that's awesome.
Well, Sham, how are you ever going to marry rich if there's nothing but marriage, right?
Well, I don't believe you need just one. If you need a rich man, you need a few of them.
That's my failed attempt at a joke for you, Sham.
I love it. You should have all the rich men that you want. I mean, yeah, there's an abundance. I always tell my clients that, like, there is an abundance of love. Don't get in a scarcity mindset. Just because you haven't met someone recently doesn't mean you won't. Like, keep the faith, keep your heart open, like, keep connecting with people.
Okay, I'm going to just turn like very far right here in the sense of like we're driving and I'm just, hit the e-brake. We talked about children. You know that I have a 1-year-old son. You have a 3-year-old daughter, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I'm sure going back to your profession, not just the broad scape of what you do, if there is a couple that is struggling conceiving a child, is that something that you've dealt with? Because that could be pretty traumatic, I assume.
Yeah, you mean like if people kind of stop having sex after they have a kid?
No,
I'm too crazy.
No, I'm sorry. What I'm meaning to say is like, say there's a couple that was trying to have a child, and they're like, okay, something's not working. Is it me? Is it you? Is it biological? Is it the position that we're in? Do people come to you and try to get advice on how to get pregnant?
I love that question, but no one has ever come to me for that reason particularly. They more come to me if they had a kid or kids and then like are having a hard time feeling sexy again or getting their sex life back. But I mean, I do think there's an energetic component that when we are feeling turned on and have pleasure, then we're in a place more to conceive. But sex is our creative energy. It's not just about like conception. It's about, you can do sex magic and you can put it towards that energy, towards like growing your business or, expanding your reach or creating like a magical party. Like our sex energy and our creativity are kind of the same thing, and it can be used in different ways. But in terms of like conscious conception is what they call that, when you're using your sexual energy intentionally, to make a baby. People don't normally come to me with that sort of thing.
Okay.
You know what though? I can totally attest to that, honestly, as an artist. Whenever like my sex life is really good, my art is really good.
Totally. Yeah. And you have amazing art. It's like colorful and bright and vibrant. And that's probably an expression of you feeling juicy and vibrant and lit up and all of that. And I think of a lot of the artists that I know and admire. I mean, even just like Prince, like he's sexy. He was sexy. He is sexy. Like that sort of energy comes through.
Violet, you said you're from the Midwest. Is that right?
Yes. Uh-huh.
And you said you grew up with very traditional kind of values?
Yes, I did.
And how hard was it to sort of like break away from that and get to the place where you're at now where you can be very open-minded? Because I'm sure with a lot of your clients, I'm sure you hear all kinds of things.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I work with Orthodox Jewish women. I work with women from India whose parents were trying to put them in arranged marriages and like all sorts of spectrum. And so I have a lot of compassion because I have been in situations that were also very conservative. But I also have a lot of passion to help people find their authentic truth and what works for them in their relationship and in their connection to their body. And I think the hardest part was leaving my marriage because it was my first kind of like feud to my parents and to society of just, no, like, why am I in this marriage and I'm not getting any of my needs met? And then after that, it just got easier and easier. But I think the reason it got easier is because I allowed myself to move towards what felt good for me, like friends that supported me, people that were fun, like people who were also open-minded, where I didn't have to hide myself or feel ashamed, where I could talk about hard things in my life, like sexual abuse or going through challenging times financially or otherwise. And they were like, yeah, we've been there. Like, we get it. It wasn't like I was all of a sudden exposing some big secret. So it became easier and easier and easier. And now I look back on my younger self, and I imagine you might feel the same way too, and just be like, I'm so proud of you. We got through that. Like, we found our truth and we're never going back. And it just feels really good to have taken care of myself in that way. I think it's a radical act of self-love to really find your people and find places where you can be fully expressed.
My question for you is, there is obviously a spectrum to sex, meaning like, what you like, what you don't like, what you'll try, what you'll never try, run the gambit of ideas. What about people that are, maybe this is the right term or wrong term, asexual? Like Morrissey, isn't he asexual, where he's not, could he get into that kind of thing where it's almost like the customer you may never, or you do have, I don't know.
I mean, it's less likely that someone will reach out to me if they are really just asexual and they're not that interested. But sometimes people do reach out to me saying, I'm not that interested in sex, but I kind of want to be. Like, I'm curious if there are some things that maybe I could try, or if some of this is coming from shame or earlier experiences. All of our nervous systems are wired in different ways. All of our genitalia and biology is different, and our needs are different. So I haven't worked with a lot of people who really are asexual and just don't have a strong interest. But I have worked with people whose maybe partner has a lot lower libido than they do. And they're like, how do we, make this work? Or people who have a lower libido than their partner. Okay. And I think it's really just about exploration.
Okay. So exploration, that's a perfect word. So somebody that has low libido, whether it's the male or the female, give us say I'm in the room with so-and-so and I'm having low libido. Not that for the listeners, I'm good. But for somebody that doesn't, give us like some free therapy for just 30 seconds if you can. Yeah,
of course. So a lot of times I focus with them on where in their body do they feel any pleasure. And it might not be in their erogenous zones. They might feel pleasure with certain touch, like just on their back or on their scalp. And I focus on helping them expand that pleasure. A lot of times if we're wanting to experience like greater orgasm or just more intimacy, but we're stuck in our head, like refocusing on the body with breath can really help. And then I have some fun tools like yoni eggs, which are these crystals that you can put up really any orifice. Like, you can use them anally or you can use them vaginally. And that can also help to release patterns of tension or holding. It can help to, unlock like things that we've been carrying that we don't need to carry, and different crystals. I mean, I'm getting woo woo out there with you guys, but I hope that's okay. Like,
no, this is awesome. This is cool to hear what's really going on. And because you're actually talking to people and helping people. Not everybody realizes that there's other people in the world, but there are other people that have other needs.
Yeah, totally. So tools like that. And then also just I think giving people permission to explore what really turns them on, because we have sometimes a limited range of what we think is like an acceptable turn on. And back to that discussion of kink, like you could get turned on by a dryer or washing machine and like the vibration that it's making. You can get turned on by almost anything. And when people allow themselves to have their fantasies and allow themselves to have their turn on, then it just unlocks a lot more.
Okay, Violet, you went exactly in the direction I was trying to go. Now,
Yay.
I need to know, really, as a sex coach, without obviously naming names, because I'm sure you can't, like the discretion of your clients is of utmost, importance, but without, giving anything away, could you tell me what is the craziest, wildest sex coaching request you've ever had?
I mean, to me, it doesn't seem that wild because I feel like I've just heard about a lot of different things. But, I feel a little bit like, I don't want to expose them, so I'm not going to name names. But there are people who have a kink around like desiccation. So they might save their poo and then like lay it out on sheets of like, plastic sheets and all of that and have sex in that. Like, to me, that's a little crazy because that's not my kink. But to those people, they're like, oh, this is like primal and earthy and so wrong, but so good. And, that to me is kind of the craziest.
I would agree.
Okay. So you say sex coach. Now, what does a sex coach say? Somebody listening that wants to be a sex coach, how do you become that? Do you get a whistle?
I mean, there's a lot of different certifications. There's different people that you can work with. I took trainings on this and other types of coaching too. But I think the most important thing is to just be really passionate about it and to have a meaning behind it, like have it be part of your life purpose or your life's mission. Like it comes through, I think, when someone is passionate because it's part of their life experience or not. And then just keep learning and experimenting and exploring with yourself. Because it's such a growing field and because people's minds are opening so much more about all the different ways that we can have sexual pleasure and all the different, ways our bodies can connect with one another, regardless of like gender or orientation or any of that. Like, I think the world needs more people who are connected and helping other people on their sex life.
What does it mean to you? Maybe this is like a very, general, like, lovey type question, but what does it mean to a sex coach when somebody finds somebody that they're so compatible with and they end up, whether forever or for a very, very long time and they don't have eyes for anybody else? What does that mean? Is that just love? Is there like a chemical breakdown of wanting to be with just one person and they both do it for each other and don't need your help, I should say?
Yeah. I mean, I think there are people who just didn't have maybe an upbringing like I did, or didn't have cultural conditioning or shame. And I think any body can learn to feel pleasure with another body as long as both people are open and willing. So I have a sneaking suspicion that even people who don't work with a sex coach are willing to like read books or watch. I don't know if you guys saw that Netflix show, How to Build a Sex Room, but to like watch things together, to prioritize it together. You don't need a coach if both of you are willing and excited to explore and to learn.
So there's energy in sex, there's energy in life, there's energy in this podcast. There's, we're here physically, I'm here, you're there, Sham's over there, but we're all here in the moment. But when there's a couple that has a sex life where it's very predictable, maybe they have sex once a week, twice a week, maybe it takes, you have to take out the garbage and then I'll do this for you, things like that. But when there's a birthday or if there's a certain thing like a day, like sometimes I feel like people go out of their way to please their man or woman or what have you. That energy is like, that's something there. It's like, why can't we live that way every day? Why can't we try to please each other as much as we can, even if we're tired, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think sex should be celebrated as often as possible, as long as it's consensual. And sometimes we get into these routines or these habits and these ruts. And to me, that feels a little bit boring. I'm just not like a traditional vanilla person that wants to have that much regularity in terms of predictability and stuff. I like novelty and I like surprise. And I think that if we're doing it because we feel like we owe our partner, like, oh, it's his birthday, I guess I'll give him this thing. Like, it feels transactional. And hey, we live in like a modern world and there's lots of transactions in this world. And sometimes that's just what's needed. But I think if we allow ourselves to cultivate our turn on and to feel connected to our fantasies and all the things we've been talking about, then we can be more sexually generous, not out of obligation, but because it's fun.
Wow. I just have learned a lot from this conversation, really. And I think I didn't even know there was such a thing as a sex coach. I had no idea. So that's a very interesting profession. And I'm sure you meet all kinds of people and hear all kinds of things.
There's a movie called Meet the Fockers. I think Ben Stiller's mom is a sex coach, right?
Excuse me, I was an extra in that movie.
Well, then you should know what a sex coach is. That's a great movie.
Yeah, I was dancing right behind Barbara Streisand at the end of it.
Yeah,
That's
Sham,
amazing.
for our listeners, Sham's been in, what was it? The guy from Mall Cop and Adam Sandler, Chuck and Larry.
Oh, yeah.
You were in that. Yeah. I saw you in the background. You're like, and then you've been in a bunch of stuff. You've been in a bunch of cameos, and one day you'll have your own show.
Honestly, I think the show is for Violet. I mean, I would watch that 24/7. I mean, that's a very interesting job.
Honestly,
really.
I feel like we haven't even scratched the surface. We've been like dancing around the idea of sex for the past 30 minutes, and I'd like to have Violet back, maybe with another guest. That'd be great to have like a couple call in.
That would be so fun. I would be so down. I mean, yeah, sex, love, dating, like relationship, all of that stuff is totally my jam.
Well, Violet, thank you so much for the interview. We love you. How can we find you online? How can people see your website and how can they find you?
Well, I have a new series of videos that's on YouTube, and it's youtube.com and then at Sage Pro Video Courses. And that's a way that you can learn all about sex, dating, relationship, love. And Brandon Matthews, who's this amazing producer, is the one who created it with me. And his Instagram handle is Sage Pro Video Courses. And that's where you can find out about that. By the way, if you're listening and you're like a coach or a therapist or a teacher or, a celebrity personality, he is doing these video courses for other people too. So you can work with him to bring your content and experience and stories to life. My personal Instagram handle is Violet Love Lange. And yeah, you can find me in those places, but really check out the Sage Pro video courses on YouTube.
And I would like to give a big shout out to Brandon Mathis, who is one of my favorite producers of all time from reality television. He did produce me on a show you may have seen. So thank you, Brandon.
Yes, I love Brandon.
Thank you very much, Violet.
Yeah, thank you. It's amazing.
And
yeah, it was super fun. You guys are amazing and awesome.
No, I'm not going to hold you to any commitment, but if you'd like to come on again, maybe in a few weeks or a month or two from now, maybe we can have you on, like we said, with a couple, whether you find them or we find them, or somebody listening, email us, call us. But we don't want to do like any fake stuff. Just a couple that's willing to lay it on the line. That'd be fun.
Yeah.
Or Sham and I can talk about our own things. Who knows?
Oh, that mine would be like a whole new series. You would need multiple episodes.
Yeah. How many seasons would you have, Sham?
I don't think there's enough numbers in the universe. But well,
Hilarious. Thank
you so much, Violet. You were so wonderful. Thank you so much for talking to us. And please, everybody, continue to listen to Living Legendary podcast on 92.3 KWXY FM. And you can find us on Spotify and YouTube.
you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Right. Bye, everybody.